right, you've had the good news. Let's go to some less positive news. But it's a bit of fun anyway. The hapless Biden administration, well, they career from one shambolic policy to another. And the best possible spin I can put on this tonight is that Joe Biden simply doesn't know that he's not telling the truth when he talks to the American people. And that is being very, very polite. You see, we can't blame dementia for Biden's history of making stories up. It's actually been a hallmark of his 4-decade-long political career. Back in his first run for president, he was actually engulfed in a controversy over plagiarism when he was caught lifting lines from a British Labor leader's speech. And he almost got away with it too, you know, until it was revealed he actually failed a class at law school for borrowing heavily from an article without attribution. They also call it plagiarism. Anyway, he was also caught exaggerating his law school record during campaign discussions. And in fact, the Washington Post, back when it was a proper paper, analysed a few of Biden's claims and found that, number one, Biden, despite his insistence, did not go to Syracuse Law School on a full academic scholarship. It was actually a half scholarship based on financial need. Two, he said he finished in the top half of his class, but he actually finished 76th out of 85. So that's the top half of the bottom 24 maybe. He actually didn't win the award given to the outstanding political science student at his undergraduate college, the University of Delaware, even though he told people that he did. And he actually didn't graduate from Delaware with 3 degrees, as he says he does, but with actually a single BA in political science and history. Have a listen.
It cannot measure the health of our children, the quality of our education, the joy of their play.
Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play.
Let us pledge that our generation of Americans will pay any price, bear any burden, accept any challenge, and meet any hardship.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship.
It's all just coincidence, I'm sure. But now, decades later, Lazy Joe, he's in the White House and he's up to his old tricks. He told ABC News that America would stay in Afghanistan until all Americans were out. And rather than contradict him, I merely point out that US Central Command Head General Frank McKenzie confirmed the day before that some Americans trying to escape couldn't get to the Kabul airport and that the last 5 American jets left without a single American on board. Their people left behind. Biden also told the American people, and I'll point out their international allies, that, and I quote, the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely. Privately, he knew differently. He knew what was to come. And that's why he contacted Afghanistan's President Ghani. And he was quoted as saying, the perception is that things are not going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban. And there is a need, whether it is true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. Well, Ghani reportedly responded, we are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, full Pakistani planning and logistical support, and at least 10 to 15,000 international terrorists, predominantly Pakistanis, thrown into this. Well, there's a reality check for the President of the United States, isn't it? That's not what he told the American people. And that's just a few of the misspoken words of the US President. His administration, it actually flounders on borders, on the economy, on spending, on health, you name it, they seem to stuff it up. And why do we care? We know it's not good for America, but it's not good for us either. You see, what goes on in America directly impacts us because we rely on them for our protection and to lead the cause for freedom internationally. I'm joined now by Kosha Gada. She's an American businesswoman and managing director at Recastled. Kosha, am I being unfair in saying the Biden administration is in shambles and Joe Biden is at the epicenter of the disaster?
Well, it hasn't been a good week for him, or a good 7 or 8 months, that's for sure. But on this Afghanistan issue, which is probably the seminal moment of his presidency so far and probably in totality, there's a little bit of a dichotomy where there's two things. We have to remember the decision was taken to actually end the war and leave, and then there's the execution and how the withdrawal was conducted. And on that first point, it really is important to remember, Cory, that this war was very unpopular. It had a growing majority of Americans did not support it and have not supported it for a very long time. These misadventures of nation building in other countries and what's known as this invade and invite doctrine, where we go in there, invade in these endless wars, and then create instability and disruption, and then import and resettle people from very different cultures and backgrounds unvetted into our country. It is not popular. And therefore, both Obama and Trump heavily campaigned on this issue, knowing that it was very unpopular with the people. And neither of them followed through. Not Obama didn't at all. Trump drew down the troops, but did not follow through, because there's been this increasing deference towards what Eisenhower termed the military-industrial complex, where presidents just have been convinced for 20 years that we need to stay in there. So for whatever reason, Biden did end this war and exited, and to his credit, I think that's one good thing. Now, how the withdrawal was done,
I will give you that point.
Parts.
I think it is a good thing. I'll give you that, Kosha.
Yes, and the right thing. But the withdrawal, I mean, it is equal parts as an American and for our allies, humiliating, infuriating, saddening, trillions of dollars spent, 20 years in here. And after all of that, you know, we leave, I think, over 100 plus, we don't even know exactly the number, but hundreds of Americans left behind. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, thousands of Afghans are being, in an unvetted fashion, imported back into the country. This does not have wide support at all. And then we leave $80 billion plus of equipment there, which has now made the Taliban the most well-equipped military, one of the most well-equipped militaries tonight. So, you know, the whole thing obviously is botched. And I would say the takeaway, the enduring takeaway from this, it includes Biden, but it extends to leadership overall, is just this continued unraveling of the veneer of the leadership class and people running the show, whether it's across the military, intelligence, public health, the economy, running up debts and deficits, you name it. People are increasingly not buying what our leaders are selling, and that is not a recipe for harmony or stability in any society. And I hate to say it, but I think we've got to brace ourselves for some tough times ahead.
Well, that's an excellent point, Kosha, I've got to tell you. And you know what's going to damage the credibility of our leaders even further is what's now airing on Afghani state TV. It is just flat out propaganda. Have a look at this Taliban ad. Okay, propaganda, car bombs, suicide vests, and celebrating Taliban's victory over the West. How is the credibility of, you know, the nations that went in there and said they were saving the Afghani people from this sort of plight? How is it ever going to be restored while they've got this propaganda and the weapons to inflict mayhem around the world?
Yeah, it won't. You know, pictures worth 1,000 words, and speeches and things will be said and speeches will come and go. But that kind of footage and that imagery with the props that I mentioned before, $80 billion worth of top-notch American military equipment in their hands, you know, it's a snub in the faces of, again, this 20-year investment that people never supported. And if there's any silver lining in this, it's what I mentioned before, that at some point this can't continue in this way and nobody's buying what we're selling, and this kind of propaganda out there is just going to lead to some kind of reckoning, I hope, from the leadership class.
Yes, I hope it does, and I hope it works in our favour. Kosha Gada, I always enjoy your insights, and thank you so much for joining me on Bernardi tonight.